When the world thinks of Burkina Faso, most imagine a poor, forgotten land, not a nation leading its own revolution. But in May 2025, something changed. The National Army, once dismissed as under-equipped and overwhelmed, delivered a stunning blow to insurgent forces in the town of Gasam. Over 80 militants were eliminated in a single operation, and not a single foreign boot touched the ground. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a declaration, a statement from a country the world had written off, a bold response from a people who had grown tired of begging for peace while burying their dead. But behind this moment was not a general trained in foreign mice, nor a politician wrapped in red tape. It was a soldier who rose from the front lines, a man whose name is now whispered with respect, fear, and sometimes hope across Africa, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Before 2022, Burkina Faso was the perfect example of a post-colonial state gone wrong. Years of insurgency had shattered communities. Foreign troops patrolled the streets. Aid agencies replaced ministries. And every solution offered came with conditions. Military operations led by foreign powers like France's Operation Barkhane failed to stop the bloodshed. In fact, the violence only escalated. Rebel groups grew stronger. Borders became meaningless. Villages fell like dominoes. Then came a shift not just in leadership but in spirit. At just 34 years old, Traoré didn't step into power. He charged into it from military barracks and dusty trenches. He saw firsthand how foreign help often meant dependency. He watched his fellow soldiers die in ambushes while generals attended conferences. And when the moment came, he didn't wait for permission. He took command. His first move was as symbolic as it was strategic: expel French troops. No negotiations, no apologies. For the first time in decades, Burkina Faso's skies, roads, and bases belonged solely to Burkinabè forces. This wasn't just about removing soldiers. It was about reclaiming dignity. But Traoré wasn't naive. He knew Burkina Faso still needed help, just not the kind wrapped in colonial handshakes and IMF contracts. So he turned eastward. Russian military advisors arrived, but not as masters. They came as partners. No political lectures, no economic traps, just tactics, training, and tools. The message was clear. Burkina Faso would choose its friends and fight its enemies on its own terms. In a world used to African leaders bowing quietly, Traoré stood tall, and soon the results began to speak louder than the headlines. The town of Gasam was more than just a dot on the map. Situated in the Boulay-Dumuhun region of Burkina Faso, it had become a strategic waypoint for insurgents transporting weapons, gold, and recruits across rural supply lines. For months, it remained under militant control, a ghost town in the heart of a nation refusing to die. That changed in late May 2025. Under the direct command of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's military launched one of its most sophisticated operations to date, not with foreign guidance, but through local intelligence, coordinated ground forces, and precision drone support. This wasn't a frontal assault. It was surgical, swift, and devastating. The operation began with reconnaissance flights over Gasam using Turkish-made Barar TB2 drones. These aircraft had become a game-changer in West Africa, offering real-time surveillance and targeted strike capabilities. Trained Burkinabè operators identified militant checkpoints, supply depots, and fortified hideouts tucked within the landscape. But Traoré's strategy was clear: minimize civilian harm, eliminate combatants. Simultaneously, 3 battalions moved from the south and east under the cover of darkness. Rather than rolling in loudly, they approached from unguarded farming paths, surprising militant lookouts. As insurgents scrambled, precision drone strikes neutralized key clusters, disrupting their defense. The engagement lasted less than a day, but the results were monumental. Over 87 militants were confirmed killed. Several were captured. Dozens of motorbikes, 2 pickup trucks mounted with heavy guns, and an arms cache containing assault rifles and rocket-propelled grenades were seized. More importantly, no civilian deaths were reported. The townspeople, those who had fled or remained in hiding, began to reappear. some in tears, thanking soldiers who patrolled the streets with purpose, not panic. Gasam marked a turning point. It was the first time in recent memory that Burkina Faso conducted such a precise, independently led operation with such a high success rate. No French intelligence, no foreign boots, just Burkinabè soldiers defending Burkinabè land guided by a leader who trusted their capabilities. But the mission didn't end with victory. Traoré ordered immediate stabilization. Patrols, community leaders were brought in. Water lines were reopened. A mobile clinic was dispatched to treat wounded civilians. And former insurgents willing to surrender. This wasn't just about reclaiming territory. It was about rebuilding trust. Across West Africa, the message echoed loud and clear. Burkina Faso was done asking for permission. GAM wasn't just a win on the battlefield. It was a declaration of independence measured in discipline, precision and unwavering resolve. And for the young soldiers who stood on that dusty terrain, many barely in their 20s, it was the first time they felt like they were truly fighting for their country and winning. Jibo had become a symbol of both hope and vulnerability. Nestled near the northern border, it had been under siege for months, surrounded by insurgents who blocked supply routes, cut off electricity, and kept thousands of civilians living in fear. When the city finally fell to jihadist forces in early May 2025, many believed it would mark the collapse of Burkina Faso's northern defense. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré had other plans. Instead of retreating or pleading for international support, Traoré assembled what would become one of the most daring and calculated counteroffensives in the country's history. Unlike previous reactions, which were often delayed and fragmented, this operation was swift, strategic, and fueled by lessons learned from Gasam. The plan began with intelligence gathering. TB2 drones and Burkinabè field scouts tracked insurgent movement, mapped weapon storage, and identified command centers. Within days, Traoré ordered the mobilization of the 27th Rapid Intervention Battalion elite units, trained in both urban and desert warfare. The offensive began on June 6. Artillery softened key strongholds on Jibo's outskirts while drones targeted sniper nests and logistics convoys. But the real impact came from the ground. Soldiers advanced in coordinated waves using house-to-house clearing tactics refined during prior operations. Unlike traditional assaults, this one prioritized both speed and precision. Soldiers were under strict orders: eliminate combatants, spare civilians. Insurgents tried to resist but were outmaneuvered. Their command posts were neutralized, their communication lines disrupted. After 72 hours of combat, the national flag flew once again over Jibo. Over 60 militants were killed, dozens captured. Local informants later revealed that many fighters had fled before the final wave, realizing they were no match for this new breed of Burkinabè soldier. But reclaiming the city was only half the battle. Traoré knew that if the people of Jibo didn't feel protected, insurgents would return. He sent in medical teams, engineers, and logistics crews. Within days, electricity was partially restored. Food convoys arrived under military escort. Families began returning to abandoned homes. For the first time in years, a war-torn community witnessed the state not just as a force of power, but as a provider. Jibo became more than a tactical win. It became a message to every militant cell hiding in the Sahel. Burkina Faso was no longer a passive battlefield. Under Traoré's leadership, it was taking control village by village, district by district. For the soldiers who liberated Jibo, the mission wasn't about medals or politics. It was about sending a clear, unmistakable signal. This land belongs to us, and we will not give it up. Not to fear, not to foreign influence, and not to those who thrive on chaos. While the battlefields of Gasam and Jibo showcased the might of Burkina Faso's armed forces, the most dangerous conflict unfolded far from the headlines. In quiet corridors, encrypted chat groups, and closed-door meetings. It was a war of betrayal, and Captain Ibrahim Traoré saw it coming. In mid-2025, intelligence operatives intercepted disturbing communications. Mid-ranking officers, some decorated, others well-respected, were plotting a coup. They weren't alone. evidence. Link them to insurgent leaders and, more alarmingly, to external diplomatic actors with interests in returning Burkina Faso to foreign oversight. The plan was layered: destabilize the capital with fear, discredit Traoré through whispers of corruption, fracture trust within the military, and then strike from within. But Traoré didn't flinch. He let the conspiracy play out just long enough to map its full scope. When the time was right, arrests were swift. Safe houses filled with foreign cash and smuggled weapons were exposed. Communications with known terrorist operatives were published to military command. The coup collapsed before it began. Traoré didn't stop there. He knew the insurgency wasn't just fueled by rifles and ideology. It fed on division. So he overhauled military leadership. Officers with questionable wealth were quietly removed. New surveillance networks were rooted not in government buildings but in the villages themselves. Elders, local chiefs, and trusted civilians were empowered to report suspicious movements. The state began to listen and the people started to believe. In the eyes of many Burkinabè, this was a new kind of leadership, one that didn't rely on foreign promises or play the democracy game with double standards, one that fought not just with bullets, but with vision. As news of the foiled coup spread, so did something else: confidence. The people of Burkina Faso were no longer just surviving. They were resisting. Insurgents were losing ground. Border zones once ruled by terror now saw patrols and medical aid. For the first time in a generation, villagers dared to hope. And that brings us here. The battles of Gasam and Jibo weren't just military wins. They were blueprints for sovereignty. They proved that Africa doesn't need to outsource its safety. That local soldiers led by local leadership can protect, restore and rebuild. Captain Traoré is not perfect. No leader is, but what he represents, defiance, dignity, direction, is reshaping the narrative of an entire region. Burkina Faso is no longer waiting for the world to approve its journey. It's moving forward. So what can you do? Stand up. Speak up. Share this story. Because in every corner of this continent, from the deserts of the Sahel to the streets of Dar, there's a generation watching and wondering if freedom is still possible without foreign permission. Let's show them it.